Hello, Thomas. How are you doing today?
Very well. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. As well as possible in these special, strange times, I
Well,
must
thanks for
say.
having me.
Yeah, thank you that you accepted to talk with us today. And I'm very glad to introduce you to our people, our community. So I may say a few words about you, and then if you want to add something that I may forget that could be interesting and
Okay.
important for the people to know. So Thomas, you have been practicing systemic work since over 14 years right now. It's true, 14 years right now?
To practice what? The?
Systemic work?
Yeah, almost 20 years now. Yes.
Almost 20 years now. Wow, that's quite a while. And with a focus on public and private organizations, both with managers and boards, as well as founders and startups.
Yes, that is
Yeah,
correct.
that is correct. You do also build an experience on more than 30 years right now in leading positions in the industry.
Yeah, it sounds like a really long time, no? When you can say 3 decades, it maybe sound a little bit shorter, but that's actually true. Yes. So.
And today you work not only, but as an independent advisor and supporter of innovating firms and organizations. Is that correct? Yes. And
That's
you do
correct.
also lead business development and restructuring projects, new business creation.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. As well as also large international organizations and development projects.
Yes. Actually, I'm basically working with, let's say, known institutions and brands pretty much on the 3 main topics at the moment, right? One is about digital growth strategies. The second one is about data and data insights, making sense out of data. And the third area is usually about impact and change. So leading impact, leading change in organizations. That's kind of the main focus. And then on the side, I'm also doing some teaching assignments in various ways. So to pass on the ideas and insights to others who could benefit from that.
Oh, great. Would you like to tell us a little bit about what you do teach? Is it to individuals?
Yeah, actually,
corporates?
I'm doing several things. So there are 2 major streams. One is I'm leading seminars on systemic constellations with a focus on business, organizations, and leadership. So that's one area. Then I'm teaching a small university course at the Corporate State University here, and that's about modeling system dynamics, because I'm also by education a system dynamicist. So I'm working with teams on how to better understand change over time from a quantitative perspective. And then I'm also using my own channel and media like YouTube or podcast to share information on a regular basis. So that's becoming increasingly popular, as I found out.
Oh, great. So you walk your talk, right? In the same meantime.
Yeah, I walk the talk, I talk the walk. So from both sides, yes.
Oh, that's great, great, great. And you also, during your work with international teams, you visited and worked in many countries. And you also spent several years in the USA.
Yes.
Right.
Actually, I spent some time in different countries. So a number of years, I was working for Microsoft for many years, and a few years from that, actually out of the United States, where I was leading international team, really large organizations. So that gave me an interesting insight about the special dynamics in larger organizations or fast growing organizations or organizations which are going through a period of change or distress.
Indeed, as probably the times we are all going through actually, right?
Right now, many organizations do, which didn't have problems in before, like 4 weeks ago, or let's say 8 weeks ago. The world was very different for many organizations, but now they have to force, and now interesting dynamics kick in a lot of organizations right now.
Yeah, and so that may lead to the first question. So,
Mhm.
why is now a good time to renew our purpose from your perspective? Talking about change.
Well, right now we're going through a major cycle of change, right? And I would say what we are seeing right now with the corona crisis or the COVID-19 crisis is just a catalyst of what we see in the industry. And this crisis, this, let's say, this short-term crisis brings out a lot of weak points and weaknesses in organizations and business models. But above and beyond that, we are also part of a major cycle. For example, when we think about the industrial revolution or the, let's say, the digital revolution that we have right now, which is really a big word, right?
Indeed.
But basically what it means, what it comes down to is, what's my job going to be next year or in 10 years? Who are we going to be as an organization, and who are we going to serve? What, in other words, what is our purpose in life, in society, and in the economy, right? And the interesting thing is that all of these discussions happen on various levels. And that's something I found out through a series of seminars in the last few years, that all of these changes happen almost at the same time on the personal level, the organizational level, the level of job, relationship, and health. So they're all interconnected, right? Which doesn't
Indeed.
make it easier, but that's why I think it's a major movement that we are in right now. And of
Mm.
course, now we have the corona crisis, which is bringing a lot of the dynamics to the forefront for a lot of organizations.
Yeah, indeed. And have you also measured that now there are more and more communities being created through this crisis? We can see people who um, get more connected with their, we may not say tribe, but communities. And so
Absolutely.
that it may also change the way the corporates and individuals may connect with other people through different
Absolutely.
values.
Yes. Organizations need to change. What you also see on the private level, no? The smallest community are two people now, right? So in many countries we have restrictions. You can only go outside if you are two people, right? Let's say the same household. That brings it down to the very atomic level of a relationship, no? Not only with yourself, but with a one-to-one
That's
relationship.
true. Yeah.
And so that's, I think, a whole new level right now that we are not prepared, because we usually have to focus on many people at the same time. But now we're almost forced in one-to-one relationships. At the same time, people are looking for help and try to create another sense of community with online communities, for example, or self-help communities, no? Which is
Indeed.
also essential for survival in the crisis. No?
Indeed. Yes. And that's a question. Can a person not yet online start an online presence now?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question, right? Because some people realize, oh, the customers are not coming to my door anymore, right? Everything happens now digitally. So you are forced to reinvent yourself and how you interact and how you provide or how you obtain services. Now, I think there are two scenarios. Some people or companies have an online presence. And when I'm working, for example, part of my business is a digital marketing agency, right? And when I look at organizations' website, they are sometimes so behind. They're like 5 to 10 years behind. And that all comes to the surface right now, because they need to be able to become the dominant channel or the major channel for, let's say, interacting with customers, winning new clients, or even reaching out to employees, engaging employees, right? So that's what I mean by this crisis brings a lot of the weaknesses to the forefront. On the personal level, a lot of people are, let's say, one-man bands, right? Or single entrepreneurs. And they're also, obviously, the best time to get online would have been yesterday, right? But of course, you can start any time, you can start any day. And one
That's a
thing
good
that
point.
I see also is that people start first with social media, which is
Mhm.
a good practice, right? But you also need to consider, do you really own this community? Or does somebody else own this? Does Facebook or Google or others own this? So you have to think about the balance a little bit between what you own and what you can leverage in terms of the social media.
That's a good point of view. Yeah, thank you, Thomas. And so, how do you accompany people and companies, probably communities,
Mhm.
to reflect on where their renewing purpose actually for social media's communication?
Right. Well, there are, let's say, at least two different angles, right? And the way I work with companies is from a rational point of view. So people know, okay, we have a problem, what do we need to do? At the same time, people or leaders or decision makers sometimes are trapped in their own world, in their former images, right? So there I'm working with them more from a, let's say, a spirit mind. And
Mhm.
there we need to figure out how to engage in this movement. So how first of all to become more clarity, gain more clarity or awareness, what is blocking the movement, and then engage in a movement and momentum which empowers them also to make the rational decisions, right? So this, I think this two-leveled approach of rational mind and spirit mind, or the inner game, if you want, the
Mhm.
inner pivoting, that's an important factor.
Oh, that's interesting. So, and which kind of tools do you use to accompany these people on these two levels, two states?
Well, on the rational mind, there are many tools I use, right? So you can use tools and frameworks. For example, when I work with a company and they want to know how to take their business to a next digital level, I, for example, do a 360 review with it and take a look at what is happening in the business, where are the key bottlenecks, where are the key opportunities to go digital, and then we figure out what needs to be done, both from a strategy level all the way down to a very tactical level, right? Because at
Mm.
the end of the day, it's not enough to say, we want to be digital. You have to say, okay, this is what we're going to start tomorrow. And then in 2 weeks' time, we're going to take a look at what was the impact? What did we get out of this initiative? On the
Understand.
spirit mind, it's more about a mix of things. So typically what I use are, for example, systemic constellation and integration in the work and the daily work of organizations and the habits resulting from that, but also some, let's say, meditative practices. I like to call them more inner journeys, right, which connect you with
Imagine.
a more deeper inner self and provides, let's say, you tap into your own resources to renew yourself again and again in this game.
Oh, I see. Oh, thank you. That's very interesting questions. Maybe people would who would be interesting. Then at the end, we will send them all the places they can find you. They may have more questions that we could have in our time. Thank you for that, because it's very interesting, very deep work.
Mm.
And so
Yes.
it's worth to understand a little bit more how it works and how it can help people to dive into these subjects. Yeah.
Right.
And so going back to a digital transformation that many
Mm-hmm.
people are talking about these days, and even the ones who are already on the stage of it, for a company who wants to pivot in the digital world, what would be the first step you could advise to them?
Well, the first step is to gain clarity, right?
Mhm.
And to really understand, where are you today? What is your position today? And what are potential futures where you want to go? And then select from these potential futures, I call them future scenarios, right?
Very good.
Which one aligns best with, what you want to do and what your client and constituency wants to do, right? So I think that's one of the first steps that needs to be done.
So
And
first
then
step would be, mhm.
there are of course very practical things when the company needs to decide which projects are we going to select. right? Because at the end of the day, you need to say, okay, here's where we're going. That's our strategy. But then how to turn that into action and to take other people with you on the journey.
Indeed. Indeed. That's a good point. Thank you. Thanks, Thomas. And in this world, which is already so digital, if some people may say so loud, how to increase consciously the visibility for an individual or corporate company, for the smallest one to the biggest one?
Yeah, that's actually a very good topic, right? Because it's not enough to just invent something and to innovate. You also have to do some marketing around it in a broader sense, right? So you need to reach the people, you need to reach the audience. Otherwise, your service cannot have an impact, right? If nobody knows what you have, if nobody finds you, then all of this innovation is basically for nothing. And one of the main problems that pretty much everybody has right now, big companies and let's say the smaller, more agile providers, is what I call discoverability. So you need to, discoverability, right? So you need to position yourself so that you are easily discoverable, right? If somebody looks for you in Google or social media or YouTube, for example, right? And let's say you have a certain topic, a certain expertise, a vertical, then you need to be on top of the list. That's what I call discoverability, right? It doesn't help. It doesn't, and they're really factual things here. So a very known statistic is about 95% of the clicks to websites on Google are coming from listings on the first page, right? And then the next page gets only 2%. And so on, right? So if you are on position 54, you get nothing, right? So you have to think about, how do I become discoverable? Without overselling yourself, but how do I become on top of the game of the vertical that I'm choosing for my business idea or capabilities?
And there are a lot of techniques around these themes, of course. So it is not only a question, this is a matter first, of course, of where do I want to be visible, from whom, but also after that, there is a lot of technical tools to increase the visibility on the big net.
It's actually interesting. It's technical. It is actually very technical, right? So you need to know exactly what to do when. But at the same time, it's also ethical, right? Because you need to get there with integrity, which means what you are showing there is something that you have and that you can deliver to others. There are many tactics and techniques which are so-called black hat tactics, right?
How do you call it again?
It's called black hat tactics, or sometimes it's called growth hacking in a different sense, right? Growth hacking is not necessarily a bad thing, it's a good thing, but it needs to be in an ethical way so that you also let's say, can deliver what you are actually presenting. And another key topic for us right now is privacy, right? So I think if you don't care for people's privacy, then you have a midterm problem, basically, right? So you need to solve that at the same time. Why becoming discoverable?
That's a good point. And this is everything that you can talk with people. People would like to reach you and to talk with you about these topics. This is something you accompany them every day.
That's actually funny, right? Because when I started my career, my first job was in online and digital marketing. And then I kind of took detours on all this management and leadership and change management, and even did some more studies, right? But what I see happening right now, a lot of these things are coming together. So when I'm working with the client, so for example, last week I worked with the client on a digital strategy, right? And then we said, okay, here's what needs to be done, right? And then I said, okay, now I'm showing you which things you need to do in Google Analytics in order to turn that into action. And they're like, wow, we didn't expect that you go so deep, but that's actually what I think is necessary, right? You have to take it to a very specific level in order to turn it into action. Otherwise, nothing is happening. No?
Yeah, indeed. So that is a good point, that you have this experience to be able to take from the top level and to go deeper and deeper in also the
Right.
technical ways. So you can accompany people from, let's say, from a A to Z point, from a A to B point.
Yeah,
Maybe people
right.
may say, that's good. Thanks, Thomas, because
Well,
it's a
what I
very
want to add is the way I'm working, others do it differently, right? But the way I'm working is I'm working with organizations to show it how to do it, right? So that it leaves a capability behind. So when the project or the engagement is over,
is
they can
over the day.
carry on. No?
Indeed.
And I think that's important because any organization needs to create a new capability to survive.
Indeed. Well, it's also said that many of the businesses existing right now won't be able to sustain
Right.
from now to 20 years maximum. So people need to renew themselves, of course, all the time.
Yeah.
So, and this is a good point, the capability and the autonomy, yes, to be able to duplicate, then to implement, and then to duplicate. Yes, that's a good point. It's a good value in our world.
Mm.
Yeah, indeed. And Thomas, how did you renew your own purpose? I mean, in
My own
this
purpose.
time of crisis.
Yeah, well, in this time of crisis, that's a good question, right? Because of course, I for myself have to take an inner inventory, and say, what do I have that others need, and what do others need that I maybe can provide now, right? I would say my pivoting started already some time ago, where I realized there are some things that I can offer which are useful right now, right? Based on previous experience and some passion that I have for certain topics. And also some new topics I discovered, for example, these dynamics of renewal and innovation that we just talked about, right? I think that's a big topic.
Yeah.
Coincidentally, last November, I was so privileged to give a course on the dynamics, the inner dynamics of crisis, right?
Really?
And it was amazing. It was a group of business people. We had a great seminar, and the topic was about crisis. Just the title crisis, and it was
Amazing.
about let's say business constellations in the context of crisis and leadership during crisis and in a
Oh, wow. And which country
now,
was it?
that
Sorry.
was in Sao Paulo, in Brazil,
Paulo
right?
was it?
It was 4-day seminar, part of a longer series that we had for, let's say, leadership development with different topics, no?
Very good.
About health, personal and organizational health, innovation, decision-making, etc. But the last module, almost like a kickoff into the situation, if you want, was about how to lead in crisis and what leads to crisis. And now when I look to this seminar, I'm always thinking about this kind of a pivotal event that also opened a new level of insight into the dynamics of crisis, right?
And it's just spot on. Yeah.
Right. And just more from the practical level, because you asked me also what I do. Of course, my approach is kind of different. What I do is I call it discovery-driven planning. Right? So every day I'm checking what is new, what is happening, what is opening up, what is closing, and then I'm adjusting and deciding what is needed right now. And down to a very detailed level, I'm also constantly in the process of updating websites and checking on new standards that need to be implemented and new services that I can offer. You know?
Oh,
So,
wow.
but now discovery-driven planning basically means you make a step, you check back, what is working, what's not working, and then you say, okay, here's a new insight that resonates, so I go in this direction. That's what I call discovery-driven planning.
But that's a great one. I may write down a few things to people after that, when they maybe it's a new way of expressing things. And
Yeah,
so
it's actually I've done a couple of videos already on this topic, no? Because you can use it you can use it for both sides. You can use it for the spirit mind approach of the renewal, but also rational mind. No? So there's some rational mind techniques that you can use for discovery-driven planning. For example, when I'm working with startups, this is super important because they don't know what they don't know, right? So we need to discover step by step and firm up the assumptions if what they're planning to do holds actually true. And if yes, they can go forward. If not, they need to pivot, maybe in a new direction. No?
So in the businesses, in corporate, we can also help people to balance. That's just great and needed.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some very, very basic human requirements right now. No? We have to realize many people, organizations are going through hardships, right?
So what? Sorry?
Through hardships, so very hard times. No? Sometimes
Yes.
an organization needs to decide how long can we keep people. I was just coming last week. I was giving a class at the university about people dynamics, no? And teaching a group of master students about how long it takes for an organization to adapt to new levels. No? That's changed over time. And that was amazing. And when I think about that, what's happening in the industry right now, a lot of organizations are still holding on, but the question is, what is the new equilibrium that they need to find? And who is going to be part of that, and how do we get there? And that brings a lot of stress. And that's, I think, where a lot of practitioners also of mindfulness practices are needed right now to work with the leaders, with the constituencies in business and organizations right now, especially in healthcare.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer of it. This is still pretty new in businesses. So because it's good that you mentioned that, and you can so you are able to
also new for me, since a few years actually, but I also had to realize this, that okay, all these things hang together in some way, right? And both let's say the people in the business and organizations and the advisors, the so-called helpers, they have to be able to work on these different levels. Otherwise, something is missing. So, and then it's questionable if the initiative or the help can actually succeed in organizations.
Indeed. And maybe some businesses can work without this whole puzzle constituted. But now we can see that more and more businesses want to come into the conscious business. And so this is something that we, of course, start to talk very much more openly than 15 or 20 years ago. So, and Thomas, it may, yes, please.
If just one comment adding to what you said now. If there's another thing that the crisis surfaces right now is when people stay home, they suddenly realize something is missing. Mm-hmm. And what is missing for many people is the organization as a living organism, which has a life on its own. It even has a soul on its own. And a lot of people are missing that right now. And I think what may come out of this crisis is what I call the big hug, a new embrace of how it is to work together in organizations.
Oh, that's beautifully said. Yeah. And it brings me to a last question, Thomas, is do you have yourself a mindful practice?
Yeah, a couple of things I do in my daily routine, right? Mm-hmm. So just very practically speaking, when I go and get up in the morning, the first thing I do is a very simple yoga asana practice, right? It's just to get the energy flowing and also to get centered for the day and figure out what is it that is ahead of me today, without anticipating what the outcome is. And at the end of the day, I take let's say an inner inventory with kind of a gratefulness practice, if you want. And then I say, okay, there's only so much that you can do in these 24 hours, right? The 24 hours make us all equal. We all have these 24 hours. And then I take an inner inventory and say, what has to be done tomorrow? And what did I accomplish today? There's another little tool that I developed for myself. It's, let's say, it's a cycle in 3 days where I'm planning 3 days in a very specific way. And that makes me, has served me very well over the years to make me more productive and prevent procrastination. Because we all have this problem to procrastinate and becoming more productive over time.
Indeed. So yes, so life is kind of waveform sometimes. So a 3 day, yes, you use a kind of 3 day circle.
Yeah.
So very interesting. Maybe people would like to know more also about that. Maybe people can also send you a little text or message somewhere. We will give
Oh, absolutely.
them your contact details, and so it was really, really interesting to have you and to be able also to see that we can combine digital world, digital transformation, and very business topics, or let's say very technical topics, plus a little piece of mind added to that. So thank you, Thomas. This is our purpose. So I remind today, so today the title is The Renewed Purpose. So we are with Thomas Wittig, and I thank you again for that. And
Thank you.
may you take care of you and your loved ones. And we have talked to you soon.
Okay, I wish you all the best and be healthy and productive.
Thanks, Thomas. Thanks very, very much. See you soon.
Thank you.